Hello everyone and welcome to this CUBE conversation. My name is Christophe Bertrand. I'm a principal analyst here at theCUBE Research. Today we're going to be talking about the very, very interesting topic of data management in the age of AI. There's a lot going on. It also connects us with cyber resiliency. Markets are combining, topics are combining, there's a lot of data. The best way to do this is to talk to experts, people who have a lot of industry expertise. So I'm very pleased to welcome today two great speakers. First, I'd like to welcome Mike Krafton. Mike is the Global Information Governance Strategist, so a gig strategist.
Yes,
welcome.
Yes. Oh, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
And I'd like to also welcome Mark Ward, the Chief Operating Officer of Congruity360.
Thanks, Christophe. Welcome, Mike.
Thanks, Ed.
Well, gentlemen, it's great to have both of you. Mike, I'd love to go back to you for a minute. Tell me about this great title you have, and what do you do every day? And tell us about the company you work for, Marsh McLennan.
So for Marsh McLennan, this is a bit of a passion place for me on a couple regards, not just my role, but the company as well. I'm actually a Boomerang employee coming back. I began my foray in information governance here about 20 years ago, head of messaging and collaboration for one of our subsidiaries before I got picked up by one of our governance vendors, EMC. I became a subject matter expert and pre-sales senior systems engineer for archiving, e-discovery, and compliance. I kind of spent some time after selling my soul to the devil on the sales side, working in different consulting capacities across Veritas and other players in the space before I eventually got invited back from Marsh McLennan to return in a information governance capacity. And so after spending the last 15, 17 years-ish in a slew of varying advisory roles, it felt very compelling to come back home again and solve for these issues within. I thought it was too good of an opportunity to pass up.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so much infrastructure growth in terms of data. It's well beyond management. I mean, obviously, we're going to be talking about governance, and that's a big word, right? So, before we get into some of the specific topics I'd like to cover, and there are really a few important ones, I'd like to just, give you a little bit of background on what the market is saying. Actually, Congruity360 sponsored research that theCUBE Research conducted recently and as part of our cyber resiliency summit effort. And we actually asked an interesting question around unstructured data, which is obviously a very vast amount of data, maybe 90% of data is unstructured. So, what do you do in terms of management of the redundancy, the obsolescence, the trivialness of data? How do you manage that ROT, which is kind of the term everybody uses? And what are the metrics that you can actually apply to the various parts of your infrastructure? Because if you don't manage those metrics, you end up in a very complex cost problem. Data is expensive. Too much data is expensive. And it turns out that, we talked to 600 people around the world. And they told us, interestingly, that on-prem, only 55% actually know the metrics associated with their ROT, which is an important point. It means if you can't manage something, you can't measure. That's a very simple saying, but it is true. When it comes to SaaS applications, it's a little better. It's only 30% that don't really have metrics, but there are some variations. Smaller enterprise companies, mid-market companies, it's maybe in the 40% range. And then when it comes to cloud, which is kind of a big word, but cloud non-SaaS, only 40% actually have good metrics. The point I'm making with this data is that it feels like we are flying blind. Mark, I'd like to get your perspective on these numbers. Is that what you see across the board with your other customers?
Yeah, Christophe, this concept of unstructured data management is becoming really part of the operational cadence within many, kind of Fortune 1000 firms. And as you mentioned, the reason being is that it's the #1 cost center for storage growth. Because of the storage cost growth, you can imagine that the compute equivalent is growing as well. When you add in AI into the equation and the GPUs associated with it, the costs continue to go up. Secondarily, the unstructured data, and when I'm talking about unstructured data, I'm talking about file data, I'm talking about object data. It is actually providing the largest portion of surface attack zone for nefarious and third-party attacks. So this concept of cost combined with, I'll call it the security threats associated with it, and eventually the desire to turn this, I'll call it cost center into a revenue or competitive advantage center with AI has put a lot of very important, I'll call it minds in the industry together to go figure out how to do it. We're fortunate to be in a position where we're learning from many end users as to how they want to adopt it. And the key components, I think, that are often missed are it's not just for the on-prem, so your legacy NAS and object on-prem. It's your cloud, and most importantly right now, as you see in the cyber resiliency world as a whole, it's SaaS applications. It's the data in Box, it's the data in Dropbox, it's the data in OneDrive, it's the data in SharePoint. All of these have the same growth characteristics and privacy and sensitive data characteristics and security characteristics.
Absolutely, and it seems to me that we still haven't solved this issue of uncontrollable data growth in silos that nobody can really measure, and there may be surprises because obviously the consequences in terms of costs are pretty obvious. The data lifecycle management is a real issue, and it has a bunch of other consequences as we think about compliance, governance in general, and also reuse with AI. So, Mike, let's get back to you. What's your take on, this data lifecycle management problem we're seeing and cost in general, and what can you share with us from your experience through the years?
Yeah, so I've had an opportunity to work with a number of large multinational firms. And so you've got the complexities of tens or hundreds of thousands of knowledge workers producing content. You've got the complexity of numerous jurisdictions, hundreds of countries to deal with regulatory oversight and some of these other things. And then when you add to that exactly what Mark just explained, the complexities of these siloed data repositories where we want to provide as an organization, multinational organizations typically try to provide their knowledge workers with options. They want them to have a blend of capabilities that eases their access to data, eases their manipulation of data, eases their collaboration with data. And so we want to provide them with secure options to exchange content within their lines of business or between their themselves and their clients. What happens here is now you've taken a small controllable set of data, and now you've spread it amongst the environment. And exactly what you began with, Christophe, which was how can you even begin to manage that if you don't know what it is, right? We need a representative unstructured data composition analysis. We need to know what exists where. How do we even begin classifying data unless we know what's out there? And then we can start to segment it and start to make sense of it. The idea that we're going to be able to simply point these incredible AI tools at a body of data and simply magic happens isn't really possible. It needs human in the loop, right? We need some degree, some ability to bring some logic and some sense to merge these two mindsets together and to start to facilitate the true value of unstructured data and its impact to AI. And so I think that's where we're going to see the trend of this, particularly for large organizations that are dealing with complex topology and complex organizational requirements.
Absolutely. I mean, the thought that, people will just start, playing with data and throw that into some AI models or processes or have agents do whatever you want with it, that's a problem. It's a big governance problem. So there's no governance without management. There are many silos. And then, of course, AI and reusing the data has become critical. So data classification is really the underlying technology we should talk about here. You brought this up, Mike. From this recent research that we did here at theCUBE Research, we know that the data classification market is actually in full swing. It's really doing really well. About half of the companies we talk to are doing something about data classification, but that means the other half isn't, which is, of course, a problem. And it doesn't mean they've done everything for those who do. And there are lots of variations around the type of technologies they use, et cetera. So, Mark, I'd like to turn over to you. What do you see from the perspective of this relationship between data classification and AI? What are the gotchas?
Yeah, the first thing that we've recognized from our customers, and I think many in the financial services industry are kind of leaders, potentially like Marsh McLennan in the insurance industry and whatnot. And that is that the most important assets are the assets that get classified first. So, Christophe, I would suggest that probably the lion's share of the feedback that you've gotten from enterprises that said they are classifying data is on structured data. So ERP systems, databases, key transaction processing systems that banks and insurance companies and airlines run. That's where our friends at Informatica and Calibra and others, for the past 10 or 20 years have been focusing on classifying that data for data lineage, master data management, and things of that nature. The reality is we all kind of have been asked to deal with is that now 90% of the world's data is on the unstructured space. So the maturity of managing the unstructured is far, far inferior to that on the structured side. And thus, there needs to be not only I'll call it a very simple approach to attacking the problem, but there also has to be some physics applied. One of the reasons why the structured data market is, I'll call it, easier to address is that the capacities of databases and ERP systems and CRM systems are, quite frankly, smaller than the petabytes and, in some cases, exabytes of data that exist in the unstructured world. So being able to go out and scan the metadata or file attributes of a petabyte of data is not as easy as it is to go and do a 20 or 30 or 40 terabyte database. So what Congruity has done is really figured out the secret sauce, integrating via API, not just into the existing legacy NAS and object systems like Dell PowerScale and NetApp, but also the cloud systems like Amazon S3 and Azure Blob. But most importantly, where the information is being processed and managed from, SharePoint, OneDrive, Dropbox, Box, you name it. Having the ability to go out and prosecute these data sources in a heterogeneous fashion with one single reporting dashboard is kind of, manna from heaven for many of the customers that we're dealing with. It's giving them the insights that they need to take that next action, and that action could be anything from remediation by deletion for data that is aged out. It could be permission changes to make sure that that data is locked down into a safe environment, particularly in the privacy and sensitive data world. Or it could be tiering data. I know many companies, and I'll let Mike talk about his, but many companies are looking at that ROT analysis and saying, let's move those redundant copies and obsolete data into a tier of storage in the cloud that is a fraction of the cost of on-prem or even cloud-based all-flash NAS or object storage systems. So being able to save money actually helps pay for, it doesn't even help pay for, it pays for the data classification efforts that many of the executives like Mike do across the industry.
Absolutely, and I will just say this, I mean, you can't just lift and shift all of the data for AI purposes. You have to really apply a lot of governance to that data before you even touch it for anything else. And there are many technologies we could talk about. And certainly, just the cost piece, I think, is very compelling. The other aspect is cyber resiliency. And really, when you do classification, it's not just because you want to save money on data. That's a very big one, by the way. But you also get to know what your data really is, and therefore what attributes you need to apply to it from a security standpoint, right? So there's a common thread here that goes well beyond the simple use case, which is not that simple, obviously, of cost or lifecycle management. It is also about cyber resiliency. So today, when it comes to SaaS environments, our research shows that security posture management is pretty low, and that's really a concern. When it comes to on-premises data, I'm just looking at the research here. It's only 50% that actually use DSPM for on-premises data. Again, for SaaS, it's about 30%. And for cloud in general, it's going to be 60%. So there are some variations here we need to think about. The net is this. You need to be using classification both for cost and for cyber resiliency because that's really the name of the game. So that's where, Mike, I'd like to get your perspective. How do you intersect with maybe your cyber teams, your data protection teams, with the work you do trying to understand and manage and govern all of the data you're responsible for?
Oh, that's a really good tee-up, Christophe. So that's a dilemma that I've been preaching from the pulpit for a while now. Is information governance is one of those somewhat ubiquitous themes that organizations are trying to tackle, and they kind of it's kind of tough to describe. And the reason why it's tough to describe is it's almost a mosaic of numerous roles and responsibilities, and so. Organizations that see the benefit, the strategic benefit, the security benefit of establishing an information governance function, knows to mature their processes that we are now going to braid together the information security systems team, legals, compliance, operations, network, storage. You have all of these brilliant people that are very smart at what they do across your organization, across legal, across IT. And now it's the opportunity to braid them together in a cohesive strategy that provides a North Star vision to an organization that says, this is the corpus of data that we are tasked as stewards to maintain. And I don't care what your organization is, whether you make a product or provide a service, IT and legal wake up in the morning to serve the organization. That's their job. And so information governance is the perfect marriage of bringing these groups together in service of the organization to solve for these things. And exactly as you just described, the complexities of dealing with the cybersecurity and everything else comes into applying these really smart people and their capabilities across the information governance framework from a people, process, and technology standpoint. And that last piece, technology, is where we're finally starting to see some of these holy grail moments occur. We've long wanted the ability to look at unstructured data. We now have really smart people and technologists and strategists and compliance personnel that are engaging with these AI systems to, leverage the technology to create a better corpus, a reliable corpus, a body of data that's more meaningful and usable to the business. That's where we're starting to see everything kind of come together. It's very exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, in closing this conversation, I'd love to get very quickly from both of you your perspective on sort of the elephant in the room, which is, cloud migrations or repatriations. I mean, this is another important use case that has all sorts of dimensions. Obviously, compliance, governance, cost, you name it. It's a performance of the applications in question. With so much data, what's your take on these sort of smart migrations? I'll go to you, Mark, first.
Yeah, I think the first thing is, from I'll call it a tools perspective, and Mike's organization, like many others, deals with this. There are a number of different ways to do data migration to and from the cloud based upon the source. What we at Congruity believe, and our customers benefit, I think, greatly from, is that when we have one ubiquitous migration service that can handle on-prem PowerScale to the cloud, OneDrive to the cloud, or Azure Blob to a lower level of Azure Blob from a performance perspective. So it's a one throat to choke approach across heterogeneous data platforms. It is really not where our profit pools are as a software company. We view it as an enabling technology to drive outcomes, and outcomes that business owners like Mike ask us to help them with, whether it be working through a divestiture. This is something in the industry right now that happens time and time again. You can't move certain data that has privacy and sensitive information from the new co to buying company. You can't move data that has an enormous amount of obsolescence associated with, that's no longer relevant, from existing co to the cloud. Efficiency and protection and security wrapped around, and this is, I think, what I've learned so much from Mike in the Marsh approach, is in an approach that everyone in the organization can leverage, so that there's not 17 different products or tools being used, I think is the outcome that most companies want. And unfortunately, for whatever reason, it's only been over the course of the past couple of years that I think companies like C360 have defined this one throat to choke approach. Information insights first, take actions, and then implement compliance. Very easy, simple, and doable.
Well, you heard it here. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Have a great one. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you for having us.
And to our viewers, thank you so much for taking the time to watch us today. My name is Christophe Bertrand, Principal Analyst at theCUBE Research. We'll see you on the next one.